Warning, due to the nature of this series, this video will contain spoilers. You have been warned. Welcome to the pilot episode of my new series, The Best Games I've Ever Played. It is my hope with this series to showcase and celebrate some of the video games that in my eyes stand above the rest. I'll be doing this by breaking down each individual element to explain my position. But I'm nothing if not fair, so I will also point out any noteworthy criticism of said games and address those individually. So, without further ado, let's get started by taking a look at what I feel is the most beautiful, masterfully written, and just downright amazing game that I've played in a long time. What game is that? Bioshock Infinite. After playing through the first two Bioshock titles, I was more than ecstatic to check out this game. Once I traveled through the underwater dystopia and saw all of the corruption, madness, and possible redemption caused by extremist libertarian and socialist regimes, the idea of this extremely nationalistic floating city in the early 1900s was a little more than appealing. Now, I've already done a review of this game, and as of now I've played through the campaign 4 separate times. Not to mention, I've also played through the Burial at Sea DLCs, which expanded the story even further. So, with all of this knowledge of the narrative, why exactly is this one of the best games I've ever played? Well, allow me to break it down for you. Personally, I feel that graphics by no means automatically make a game good. I've seen my share of titles which look beautiful, but were very lackluster on all other accounts, and vice versa. With that being said, I will say that this game creates some very breathtaking visuals. While not going for hyper-realistic aesthetics, the game still does show an interesting amount of detail in the environments, weapons, NPCs, and of course, the Vigors. But the most amount of detail was put into Elizabeth herself. Not only was she designed very well, but you as the player get to see her evolve before your eyes. When you first meet her, she looks young, happy, excited, and full of life, which of course makes sense considering she is seeing the beauty of the outside world for the first time. But once she sees Booker kill someone, and becomes more involved in engagements, you can not only see her clothes become more tattered, but also her body language begins to change. By the end of the game, not only is she in different clothes, but she has dark circles under her eyes, she looks much less enthusiastic, and her entire demeanor has changed. I as the player truly understood the horror that she not only had witnessed, but also experienced just by looking at her. If that wasn't motivation enough to attempt to make things right, then I'm not sure what was. Now, I don't know about you, but I had a blast playing this game. Granted, when you break it down, it's not that much different from the first two Bioshock titles, but I don't necessarily think that this is a bad thing. There is a large variety in the weapons you can use, some of which change once you start dimension hopping. Plus, the Vigors in this game are a blast. I had the time of my life using water tentacles to throw the Vox off of Columbia, only to pull them back in and do it again. Not to mention, the addition of the skyhooks gave the gameplay a very high-octane feel. Jumping from rail to rail while hanging thousands of feet above the ground and avoiding sniper rounds, rockets, and robotic monstrosities is sure to get your adrenaline pumping. Plus, the interaction with Elizabeth is fantastic. She doesn't get in your way, she can't be hurt or kidnapped, and she throws you ammo, salts, health, and money to help you in and out of combat. Of course, she does occasionally give you money when you're low on health, or ammo when you're out of salts. Admittedly, the enemy AI did seem a bit iffy at times, doing things such as running back and forth between cover, when all that accomplished was me taking potshots at them. But the foes typically took a quantity over quality approach, so there was some sort of challenge there. Not to mention the nightmares that are handymen. Pro tip: if you ever plan on running this game on 1999 mode, never, ever, ever attempt to fight these things head on. You will regret it. The soundtrack of this game is nothing short of brilliant. I didn't really notice this during my first playthrough, but aside from the orchestral score, many of the songs were tunes from the 1960s, 80s, 90s, and even a couple from roughly the era of the game, but still a few years afterwards. Of course, the reason I didn't notice this at first was because these tracks have been modified to a ragtime style. But even these retroactive covers are fantastically put together and are very appropriately used in regards to each situation. Fortunate son in the middle of a revolution? Check. Everybody wants to rule the world during a major power struggle? Double check. Girls just want to have fun while Elizabeth is having fun? Absolutely. Even aside from these tracks, the beautiful instrumental tracks greatly enhance the atmosphere, much like they did the original Bioshock. Ranging from the beautiful ascent into the clouds, to the horrific descent into madness. Each and every track in this game wonderfully validates the setting and creates a grand amount of atmosphere. Now, I'm sure that most of you who have played this title would agree that the story is the absolute best part of this game. It starts off simply enough. You're a man who is in debt due to his gambling habits and must retrieve a young girl and deliver her to his debtors. It's that simple. Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt. Or is it? Now, of course, the addition of a floating city in the sky does make things a bit more complicated, but even that is just the tip of the iceberg. Who is Booker in debt to? Why do these people want Elizabeth? How has Booker never heard of this city? What happened to Elizabeth's pinky? How were all of these songs from the 60s being played in 1912? What does AD mean? How can Elizabeth pull items from alternate dimensions? Who is oh, sorry, wrong Bioshock. Now, I had some of these questions when I started the game, and I knew that since this is a Bioshock title, there would be some elaborate plot twist. But I never, ever would have guessed just how well put together the narrative is. After playing through this game multiple times, I not only discovered that some plot elements, which were seemingly oversights, were actually explained very well. The only difference with this title, however, is that the answers to these questions are all in the narrative, but it's up to the player to find them. I was amazed at even how the minor dialogue between Booker and Elizabeth seemed to be throwaway lines, but they actually explained quite a bit. In fact, there's a back and forth near the end of the game which literally gives away the ending. But of course, you wouldn't know that unless you knew how the game ended. The way that this story jumps between various dimensions makes for some incredible set pieces, and raises a large amount of discussion regarding the continuity of the narrative. But let's not forget the Burial at Sea DLCs. These DLCs were just okay gameplay-wise, but these trips back to Rapture brought the story full circle, and beautifully connected the two titles together. In conclusion, this narrative is a beautiful story about love, loss, heartbreak, and redemption, with political commentary and scientific intrigue thrown in. With all of these elements masterfully weaved together, this is one title that merits a large amount of discussion, even to this day. While I've been highly praising this game the entire video, I will admit that there are flaws here and there, and I will address some of the most common critiques of this game that I've seen. So let's get started. Number 1. This game doesn't have the same atmosphere as the first title. Well, I would agree. While this title does have some intense, dire, and downright creepy moments, you never really get the horror or claustrophobic feeling from the first Bioshock, even though you are essentially trapped as you can't just jump off the city. In fact, I'd say that Bioshock Infinite is more of a sci-fi adventure title than anything else. But this element never really bothered me, as I thought that attempting to stick too closely to the original would be a disservice to both this title and that one. While the atmosphere is rather different, this game still does have the overall feel of a Bioshock game, with its combat, storytelling, and even the sound effects. Number 2. The story doesn't make sense. As for this point, I do not agree. Now, like I've said before, you will have to go out of your way to piece together the narrative, and this will probably, no, definitely, require multiple playthroughs. So, if one wasn't interested in the game the first time around, then I really can't expect them to search any further. However, I've also heard this point phrased as, the story is overly complicated. And to this point, I somewhat agree. Yes, the narrative is very complex as it hits upon social, political, and racial issues of the early 20th century, and all of that takes a backseat to the addition of quantum physics. So I can understand how such a complex storyline would be a turnoff to some players, but I personally feel that the story is a very important part of most video games, so this worked out just fine for me. Number 3. Booker is unlikable, and he's not even the main character. I completely agree with both of these points. Booker is not by any stretch of the imagination a good person. He is an alcoholic, a compulsive gambler, he took part in the massacre of Native American men, women, and children, and he was decorated as a result. He only tries to save Elizabeth initially to save his own skin, and he isn't much of a better person than any other incarnation of him across the multiverse. Granted, he does change his demeanor later in the game, and by the end he genuinely does attempt to make things right, but overall he isn't really a man who deserves much sympathy. Plus, he really isn't the main character. The focal point of the entire game is Elizabeth. She's the one everyone's after. She's the one who has the power to enter alternate dimensions, and she's the one who, in the end, I really ended up caring about. However, I didn't think that Booker being the player's avatar was really a problem. To me, the storytelling was very akin to the novel The Great Gatsby. The story is narrated by Nick Carraway, but the focal point is Jay Gatsby. I feel that this style of storytelling worked quite well, as the player could see the evolution of Elizabeth from the outside looking in, which made the effect of our actions that much more apparent. Number 4. The original trailers made this game look better than it is. This is typically referring to the fact that the game looked much more open world, and that Elizabeth took a much larger role in the combat. To an extent, I do agree with this complaint. I would have preferred the game to be more open world, and while Elizabeth is very helpful in combat, much more helpful than the allied NPCs in most games in fact, the trailers did make it seem like she had a much larger range to her powers. But while this is slightly disappointing, I'm not one to dwell on what could have been, and I am very happy with the finished product. And finally, number 5, your choices really don't matter. Honestly, this is probably my biggest issue with the game. Now I know that due to jumping between realities, your choices may just change without you knowing, but if that's what they were going for, then why give the player any illusion of choice at all? Plus, unlike the first 2 Bioshocks, there aren't even multiple endings, so the choice to give the players a choice is just baffling to me. So, despite its flaws, I still feel that this is an absolutely beautiful game, and to me, it marked the end of an era. As one of the last titles before the release of the next-gen consoles, this game showcased an impressive appreciation in its creativity, storytelling, graphics, and gameplay. But, above all else, this title showcased the beauty of the human spirit, and the hope that despite all of our flaws, somehow, some way, across the entire multiverse, we may just have a chance to make things right. It's this beauty that allows me to conclusively say that Bioshock Infinite is one of the best games I've ever played.